My son gave me a car, I told the woman at the DMV. A gray sedan. Said it was mine now. Even handed me the keys like I was getting an award. She looked at me over the top of her glasses and nodded without much interest. I suppose they hear stories like that all the time. Old women grasping at ownership, memories, lost ground. But I wasn't making it up. He said it out loud, right there in the driveway. It's all yours, Mom. You've earned it. That was 4 months ago. I'm not one to ask for things. Never have been. Not from my husband. Not from my son. Not even when the roof leaked for a week before Harold noticed. I fixed things quietly, with elbow grease and prayer. But that day, when Trent handed me the keys, there was something different in his voice. Something performative. He had his phone out, filming. Gotta show the guys at work what a good son I am, he joked. I laughed politely, not understanding. The car was nice, newer than anything I'd ever driven. Push start, heated seats, even that beeping thing when you back up too close. It made me nervous at first, all those lights and buttons, but I got used to it. I even started to like the little digital screen that showed what song was playing, though I always turned the music off. Every Sunday, I drove it to church. Parked in the same spot I used to park Harold's old truck. The ladies would say, "Virginia, is that yours? Fancy." And I'd smile, nod, sometimes say yes, sometimes just, "My son helped me get it." I didn't feel like I owned it, not really. But it was in my driveway. I had the keys. I filled the tank. That counts for something. When Trent gave it to me, I didn't ask if the title was in my name. I didn't even think to. It felt like a gift. And after all I'd done, after raising him alone when Harold died in that machinery accident, after co-signing the loan for his landscaping business, after helping raise Ellie when his wife left, I thought maybe this was just gratitude. But the first odd moment came at the mechanics. I went in for an oil change and they asked who owned the car. I said I did. They pulled up the system and frowned. "It's under a Trent Hopkins," they said. "Relation?" I paused. "My son. He gave it to me." They shrugged. "Guess he never transferred the title." I laughed it off. Told myself it didn't matter, but it did. Because last week, I called Trent and said I wanted to sell it. Not out of spite. I just didn't drive much anymore, and Ellie needed help with tuition. I thought maybe if I sold the car and gave her the money, it'd mean something. A legacy of sorts. He went quiet on the phone, then said, "It's not really yours to sell, Mom." I blinked, confused. "But you gave it to me." "Yeah, well, technically it's still in my name. I was just letting you use it. Just letting me use it." Those words sat in my stomach like spoiled meat. Use. Like I was some tenant in his life, borrowing air. That was Thursday. By Saturday morning, there were police on my porch. I was still in my nightgown when they knocked. I thought maybe it was a mistake, a neighbor's complaint or some mix-up. But the younger officer, polite but firm, said, "Ma'am, we received a report that you're in possession of a vehicle that's been taken without permission." I stared at him, heart thudding. "That's my car. My son gave it to me." He nodded like he'd heard it before. "Do you have documentation?" Keys in my hand. Gas receipts in my purse. But nothing with my name on the title. They didn't arrest me. Thank God. But they asked me to step aside, and I watched from the porch as they opened the driver's door and started writing things down. I felt like I was shrinking, like the past 60 years of labor and love were being erased in one official note. Inside, the kettle screamed on the stove, but I didn't go turn it off. I stood there, barefoot on the concrete, realizing something I should have seen long ago. My son didn't give me anything. He gave me an illusion. The house smelled like burnt tea and shame. I turned off the stove and stood at the sink, staring at the cracked tile above the faucet. The crack had been there for years. Harold always meant to fix it. Just like Trent always meant to call more, visit more, be the son he thought he was when he handed me those keys. I didn't go to church that Sunday. Didn't want the questions. "Where's the car, Virginia? Everything all right?" I wasn't ready to lie, but I wasn't ready to tell the truth either. I spent the day in my chair, hands folded, mind racing. At one point, I opened the drawer with my old files. Birth certificates, Harold's death certificate, Ellie's school photos. I was looking for something to ground me, something that said, "You existed, you mattered." What I found instead was a copy of a check, dated 7 years ago, $14,000, down payment for Trent's first company truck. My name was on it. Underneath, in my own handwriting, loan, no interest. I'd never asked for it back, never intended to. There were more like that. Little payments here and there. A new washing machine when their old one broke. Cash to cover daycare when Ellie's mother vanished. Groceries during slow season. Every time I'd said, "Of course, honey. That's what mothers do." I was so used to giving that I never noticed when the asking became taking, when the gratitude turned to expectation, when my son stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. Monday morning, I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom." There was no apology in his voice, no discomfort, just casual familiarity, like nothing had happened, like the police on my porch had been a weather report. "I'd like to talk," I said. "Sure," he said, "but make it quick. I'm headed to a job site." Of course he was. Always busy, always important. I remembered when he used to call just to tell me Ellie lost her first tooth or that he saw a hawk in the backyard. Now he barely had time to breathe between invoices. "I want to know why," I said. He was silent. I imagined him rolling his eyes, adjusting the phone between shoulder and cheek, maybe checking his mirrors while he drove. Multitasking, as always. "Why you told the police I took your car," I continued. "After telling me, in front of God and half the neighborhood, that it was mine." He sighed. "Look, Mom, I was trying to do something nice, but technically, it's still my car. Legally. And when you said you were going to sell it, I panicked." "Panicked," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. "So you called the police?" "It wasn't like that. I just needed to make sure it didn't get sold out from under me." "As if I'm some thief," I said, my voice tightening. "As if I'd run off and spend your precious car money on cigarettes and scratch-offs. That's not fair." "No, Trent. What's not fair is how you treat me like an appliance, like I'm useful until I'm inconvenient." There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "You're overreacting. You still have the house. You're not out on the street." That stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I did still have the house, but I was beginning to wonder how long before that, too, became his to help with and later control. I hung up before he could say more. Then I sat very still. The silence in the house was different now. Not peaceful. Hollow. Not quiet. Sterile. The kind of silence that makes you notice your own heartbeat. Around noon, Ellie called. "Hey, Grandma," she said, her voice soft like always. "You okay?" I hadn't told her anything, not yet. I didn't want her to be caught between us, but somehow she knew. Maybe Trent mentioned something. Maybe the tension just floated in the air like pollen. I'm fine, darling. You sure? Dad seemed weird, off. I suppose he has his reasons. She hesitated. Did something happen with the car? I paused. Then I said, he asked for it back. Technically true, emotionally diluted. Ellie exhaled slowly. You know, sometimes I wonder if he realizes who you are, what you've done. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. He remembers when it's convenient. We talked a bit more. She told me about her classes, her roommate, some professor she didn't like. But the undercurrent was there, a kind of invisible thread of shared sadness. She knew, and that was enough. After we hung up, I stood in the living room and looked around. Same curtains I'd sewn 20 years ago. Same bookshelf with Harold's war novels and my old church bulletins. Same dent in the armrest from the years he'd sit and fall asleep during the 5 o'clock news. Everything here was mine. Every inch of this house had been earned, with labor, with patience, with love. Nothing borrowed. Nothing just loaned. And I realized something then, something clear and sharp as a pinprick. If my son saw me as someone who could be dismissed with a phone call, with a police report, it was because I had allowed it. And if I wanted my life to belong to me again, I'd have to take it back, piece by piece. Tuesday morning, I dressed carefully. Not because I had anywhere to be, I hadn't had a proper appointment in months, but because I needed to remind myself what it felt like to be deliberate. I chose my navy skirt and the white blouse with the little pearl buttons, the one Harold always liked. Then I tied back my hair, put on my shoes, and sat down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. I'd written checks for everyone in this family, for weddings, for tuition, for overdue bills. But today, I was writing for myself. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What do I actually own?" It was a short list. The house, thank God, still in my name, paid off after Harold passed. The furniture, most of it old, but sturdy. A few bonds left from when Ellie was born. My name, my reputation, my memories. Not much, but real. Then I flipped the page and wrote, "What have I given?" It took 4 pages. Loans, gifts, bailouts. I wrote down dates, amounts, what it was for. A new roof for Trent's house when the insurance refused to cover it. Half the cost of that private kindergarten, Ellie barely remembers. The vet bills when their dog, Benny, got sick. Birthday parties, emergency dental work, flights, groceries. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the weight of it, the one-sidedness. Not once had Trent said, "Mom, are you managing okay?" Or, "Do you need help around the house?" Not once had he offered to take me to a doctor or pick up groceries. The giving only went one way. I used to think that was love. I used to call it sacrifice. Now, I was starting to call it something else. That afternoon, I called the bank. A woman named Paula answered. She sounded young, maybe Ellie's age, cheerful but brisk. "Mrs. Hopkins, what can I help you with today?" "I'd like to review the status of all accounts where my name is primary or secondary." A pause. "Certainly. I'll need to verify your identity first." I answered her questions. Birth date, last 4 digits, the name of my first pet. She clicked her way through the system. "All right," she said. "It looks like you are listed as the primary account holder on your own savings and checking, and as co-signer on one account belonging to a Mr. Trent Hopkins?" "That's my son." "Right. And it also appears there's an automatic transfer of $200 set up monthly from your savings to his checking, labeled as family support." I closed my eyes. Can you tell me when that was initiated? She clicked again. 6 years ago. May 4th. Right after his divorce. And can it be stopped? Yes, ma'am. You'll need to come in and sign a form, but we can suspend the next transfer immediately. Do it, I said. Another pause. Just to confirm, you'd like to suspend all automatic transfers to Mr. Trent Hopkins? Yes, effective today. Something in her tone changed. Maybe it was in the way I said it. Maybe she heard something other women had said to her grandmother once. I'll make a note in the system. You can come in tomorrow and finalize the paperwork. Thank you, Paula. After we hung up, I sat very still. The sun had shifted across the linoleum floor, drawing long, pale lines across my feet. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of gravity, of doing something irreversible, a line drawn in wet concrete, not sand. Trent would notice soon. The end of the month was coming. That money was likely already spent before it arrived. I didn't care. Let him notice. Let him feel the weight of missing what he'd taken for granted. The next call I made was to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Virginia Hopkins, I said when she answered. I don't suppose you still make that rhubarb jam that tastes like it should be illegal? Lillian laughed. You know I do. And don't tell me, you're finally coming to bingo? Not bingo, just tea. I need to sit with someone who remembers who I used to be. You bring the sugar, I'll bring the sass. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling. That evening, Trent called. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Mom? His voice was cautious. Yes. I just got a notice from the bank. Something about a transfer being declined? I canceled it. A beat. Why? I think you know why. He scoffed. You're seriously punishing me over the car? You're being dramatic. No, Trent. I'm being awake. Jesus, Mom. No more automatic money, I said. No more quiet yeses. No more pretending things are okay. You're not thinking straight. No, son, I said quietly. For the first time in years, I am. The next morning, I arrived at the bank 15 minutes before it opened. I didn't want to run into anyone. I didn't want to chat or explain. I just wanted the papers signed and the air cleared. Paula wasn't at the front desk, but a young man, crisp shirt, too much cologne, greeted me and led me to her office. She looked different in person, younger, soft voice, soft hands. But there was something firm in her posture. I have everything ready, Mrs. Hopkins, she said. These are the forms to terminate the transfer authorization and dissolve your cosigner status. I signed them without hesitation. When she handed me the last page, she paused. Do you mind me saying something? I looked up. You're not the first woman I've seen do this, and every time I think, finally, someone drew a line. I nodded, but didn't speak. What would I have said? That the line had been there all along, faint as thread, and I'd just pretended not to see it. After the bank, I walked to the cafe across the street, ordered black coffee and a slice of pie. I hadn't eaten breakfast. The pie was dry, the coffee bitter. But I finished it all. Across from me sat a woman with a little boy. She was talking to him about dinosaurs. Animated. Bright. He listened with wide eyes and sticky fingers. I wondered if that's how I used to sound with Trent. If I'd ever been that gentle. My phone buzzed. A text. Trent, so that's it? After everything I've done for you? I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words. Everything he's done for me. I left the cafe and headed to Lillian's. Her house smelled like old lavender and butter. She'd already set the table: floral teacups, shortbread cookies, jam in a mason jar. "You look different," she said as I walked in. "More spine." "I'm tired of being everyone's cushion." "Good," she said. "Let 'em fall on the floor for once." We talked for hours about marriages, children, the things we'd swallowed over the decades. She told me about her daughter, the one who only called when she needed money for a business venture. I told her about the police at my door. At one point, Lillian poured more tea and said, "You know, they always come back when the money stops." "But it's not the apology that matters. It's what they do after it." I nodded. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was watching the space where it should have been. When I got home that evening, there was a letter in the mailbox. Handwritten. No stamp. It was from Ellie. A short note. "Grandma, I don't know what's going on between you and Dad, but I want you to know, I see you. I see what you've done. And I love you. Always. Ellie." I sat on the porch and read it 3 times. The last line stayed with me. Not because it was new, but because it felt like water in a desert. Maybe I didn't need the whole family to understand me. Maybe I just needed one person to see me fully and not look away. Inside, the house was quiet. I stood by the window looking at my driveway. Empty now. No car. Just oil stains and the shape of something that had been there too long. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. Thursday. Trent showed up unannounced. I saw him through the kitchen window, parking half on my lawn like he used to when he was a teenager running in for soda. He didn't knock right away, just stood there, fiddling with his phone, probably checking whether I'd blocked him. I didn't. Let him come. When he finally knocked, I opened the door, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and stepped aside without a word. He came in like he owned the place, which I suppose in his mind he did. He'd once said, "When you're gone, at least I won't have to worry about rent." As if I were a mortgage ticking down. Now he stood in my living room, frowning at the old furniture, the quiet. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Doing what?" "You know what. Canceling transfers. The car, the bank, making things complicated." I tilted my head. I didn't realize protecting my own money was complicated. He exhaled loudly, like I'd slapped him. "You're making this personal." "It is personal." "Come on, Mom. I've got responsibilities. A daughter in college. A business to run. I raised a child, ran a house, and worked nights folding sheets in a motel laundry while your father was dying," I said. I didn't call that a reason to take things that weren't mine. He stared at me. I'd never spoken like that to him. Not with that tone. Not with that edge. "I've helped you," he said quietly, as if reminding me. "That car? I paid for it. You called the police on me over it." He looked away. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "That was clarity. For once." He dropped into the old armchair. Harold's chair. He shouldn't have, but I let him. "I'm not the bad guy," he muttered. I didn't respond. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he said something so quiet, I barely caught it. "Ellie told me you cried." I looked at him. "I didn't cry," I said. "Why is she taking your side?" "There aren't sides, Trent. There are only actions. And consequences." He rubbed his face with both hands. He looked tired. But I didn't feel sorry for him. "I need help with the tuition," he finally said. I was counting on that transfer. "I'll help Ellie," I said. "Not you." "Not through you." He looked up sharply. "You're going to give her money behind my back?" "No. I'm going to give her respect. She earned it." He stood, walked to the door, then paused. So what? You're cutting me out. Just like that? I walked over and opened the door for him. No, I said. You did that. He stood there a moment longer, like he might argue. But then he walked out, got in his car, and slammed the door louder than necessary. I watched him drive off. Then I locked the door behind him, slowly, on purpose. Not out of anger, out of peace. I didn't expect Ellie to show up that evening, but there she was, standing on my porch in an oversized sweatshirt, holding a bag of takeout and looking like she'd just walked out of one of those coming-of-age movies they make about girls who don't yet know they're strong. I brought Thai, she said, raising the bag like a peace offering. Figured you wouldn't feel like cooking. I didn't. I hadn't even taken the chicken out of the freezer. We sat at the kitchen table, eating straight from the containers with mismatched forks. She kept her head down at first, like she wasn't sure how much she was allowed to say. Then she asked, "Was he awful?" I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "He was himself," I said. She nodded, chewing. "He said you were turning into someone else." "I think I'm just turning back into who I was before I forgot." That made her smile, just a little. "You were never weak, Grandma. You just let everyone believe you were." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We finished dinner in silence. Afterward, she washed the dishes without being asked. I sat at the table, watching her hands, the same shape as her mother's, but steadier. "You know," she said over the running water, "when Dad told me he called the police, I didn't believe him at first. I thought maybe you were exaggerating." I nodded slowly. "But then I saw the report. He really did it. He really filed a statement like you were some stranger taking off with his property." She turned off the water and wiped her hands. I asked him, "Do you know what kind of woman you're doing this to?" "What did he say?" "He said, 'She's not who she used to be.'" I exhaled. "He's right, in a way." "Yeah," she said, sitting down. "But maybe that's not the insult he thinks it is." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I want you to have this." I shook my head before even opening it. "Ellie, it's just a card. No money, no drama." I opened it anyway. Inside, in her looping script, was a single line. "You don't owe anyone your silence." I closed it and held it between my palms. "You're a good girl," I said. "I'm just trying to be more like you," she replied. We didn't hug. We're not that kind of family. But when she left, she touched my shoulder. And that was enough. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, card still in my hand, and thought about the last time someone told me I was allowed to speak. I couldn't remember, but I could feel it now. A door, somewhere inside, beginning to open, and this time, I had no intention of closing it. Friday morning, I called my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Lafferty in nearly a decade. Not since I updated my will after Harold died. But when his secretary patched me through, he remembered my voice before I even said my name. "Virginia Hopkins," he said, sounding pleased. "Haven't heard from you since you baked me that dreadful rhubarb pie." I chuckled. It wasn't that bad. "It was aggressive," he corrected. "So, what can I do for you?" "I need to set up a trust," I said, "for my granddaughter." He went quiet for a moment. Then, "You want to come in Monday?" "I want to come in today." By 10:30, I was sitting in his office, leather folder in hand, fingers wrapped around a mug of bitter coffee. His office hadn't changed. Same heavy bookshelves, same framed law degree from 1978, same framed picture of a sailboat I'm convinced he never actually owned. I want to move what's left of my savings into a protected trust, I told him. Ellie's name only, and I want it airtight. No way for her father to touch it. He raised an eyebrow. That specific, huh? I'm tired of my money being a family sport. He nodded and started taking notes. We went over the balances, the accounts, the tax implications. It took longer than I expected. I hadn't realized how tangled things had gotten. Co-signed accounts, joint credit cards opened without my consent. I'd said yes to so many things over the years, half listening, half trusting. And now I had to unwind it all. At one point, he looked up from his notes and said, "You know, a lot of people your age don't get around to doing this. They let it ride." "Then a lot of people end up erased," I said. We signed preliminary documents. He'd need a few days to finalize everything. As I gathered my things, he said, "Virginia, if I may, it's not easy to do what you're doing, to draw a line at this point in your life." I looked him in the eye. I let them believe I was a wallet with a heartbeat. That ends now. On the way home, I stopped at the pharmacy. Not for prescriptions, I had refills enough, but for the sheer act of buying something I wanted. I picked out a bottle of rose-scented lotion and a crossword puzzle book. Small things, but mine. At home, I found the house quieter than usual. Not in that hollow way, but in a settled way. The way an empty room feels when it's finally been cleared of things that don't belong. I took off my shoes and made tea. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Trent. Not yet. To Ellie. A real letter. Pen on paper. I told her about the trust, about what I was doing and why, about how it wasn't just money I was leaving her, but the right to say no, the right to draw a line, the right to refuse to be taken for granted. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't explain every wound. I just told her the truth, that love without respect is a slow kind of erasure. And I didn't want her to disappear the way I almost did. When I sealed the envelope, I felt finished. Not done with life. Just done with waiting for someone else to give me permission to live it. By Sunday, the messages started getting desperate. Trent had shifted from cold silences and defensive barbs to polite confusion, then to urgency, then, slowly, to panic. "Mom, I think we should talk again. I may have overreacted. Ellie told me about the trust. Can we at least discuss it before you make things permanent? It's not fair to blindside me like this. We're family." I read them without responding. Not out of cruelty, just clarity. I had nothing left to explain, and for once I didn't feel guilty about that. I spent most of the day cleaning the attic. The dust made my joints ache, but it was worth it. I needed to see what I'd been storing all these years. Boxes of Ellie's baby clothes, Harold's old fishing gear, stacks of Trent's schoolwork, still in manila folders I'd labeled by grade. Report cards with notes like, "Talks too much," and "Quick mind, but easily distracted." Under one box, I found a smaller one I didn't recognize. Faded floral pattern, tied with an old piece of twine. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Every birthday card Harold ever gave me. Some handwritten notes he'd tucked into my apron pockets over the years. One read, "You're stronger than you let them see. Don't forget that." I sat on the attic floor, card in my lap, letting the silence settle around me like a shawl. And I thought, what would Harold have done if he'd seen our son call the police on me? What would he have said? Then I realized it didn't matter, because I already knew what I had to say. And I wasn't afraid to say it anymore. That evening, I finally returned Trent's call. He answered on the first ring. "Mom," he said, breathless. "Thank God." "I have 10 minutes," I said calmly. "Use them well." He stumbled through the first part. Apologies that sounded like they were stitched from online templates, full of phrases like, "I see now that I may have caused distress." I let him finish. Then I said, "This isn't about a car." Silence. "This is about 30 years of disrespect. This is about how every time you needed something, I opened a door, and every time I needed a moment, you closed it. Mom, that's not—" "I'm not asking for anything, Trent. I'm just telling you the truth. For once." He sighed. "So what now? We just stop being family?" "No. We just start being honest about what kind of family we are." He didn't reply. After a while, I said, "Ellie will be fine. She has her own compass." He snorted, soft and bitter. "She's just a kid. She's everything I hoped you'd grow up to be." He hung up after that. I stood at the window and watched the street outside darken. Somewhere down the block, a wind chime danced. The scent of someone grilling drifted faintly in. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, not angry, not triumphant, just whole. And that was enough. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk without a destination. No post office run, no grocery list in my coat pocket, no doctor's appointment waiting across town. Just me, my walking shoes, and the breeze cutting gently through the last stubborn heat of summer. The sidewalks were cracked and familiar, the houses unchanged, Miss Lila's shutters still peeling, the Hendersons' hydrangeas still overgrown. A dog barked at me from the same porch where he'd barked for the last 7 years. It was as if the whole street hadn't noticed I'd changed. Maybe that was the point. I walked slower than I used to. Not out of weakness. Out of intention. Letting my breath settle. Letting my mind sift through everything it had been holding. Every time Trent's voice had made me second-guess myself. Every time I'd reached for my checkbook before my boundaries. Every moment I'd swallowed something I should have said out loud. By the time I reached the small park near the library, my legs ached, but not in the way that needed medicine. They ached like muscles waking up after too long. I sat on the bench near the duck pond, and for the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. Instead, I watched. A little boy tossed breadcrumbs into the water. His mother scolded him gently for not tearing them small enough. He rolled his eyes, then softened, and did as she asked. It struck me then how small love is in the moment. Just crumbs and corrections. But over time, it becomes the shape of who we are. I thought about Ellie. She'd texted me that morning. "Thinking of you. Hope today feels like yours." It did. I went home with sore legs and a clear mind. Made lunch. Sat on the back porch with a book I never managed to finish last year. The phone rang once. Twice. I let it go. Then, around 5, a knock at the door. Not Trent. Not Ellie. Marissa. Of all people. She stood there in slacks and flats, makeup perfect, posture tense. She looked like someone who wasn't used to not being in control. "Virginia?" she said, not quite warm. "May I come in?" I opened the door without a word and led her to the living room. She perched on the edge of the couch like it might stain her. Glanced around. I noticed her eyes linger on the framed photo of Harold holding baby Ellie. "I wanted to talk to you," she said finally. "Before this thing with Trent gets worse." I raised an eyebrow. "It's already been worse." She smiled tightly. Look, I know Trent isn't always subtle, but he's overwhelmed. The business. Ellie. The divorce. He's under a lot of pressure. I said nothing. He didn't mean to hurt you, she went on. He just reacts. And calling the police on me was just a reaction? That stopped her. She shifted. It was misguided. I'll admit that. But this whole cutting him off thing. This thing, I interrupted, is my life, not a chess piece, not a punishment, a boundary. She blinked. He thinks you're trying to control him. I almost laughed. Control him? I spent 30 years tiptoeing around his moods like broken glass. You think this is about control? Silence stretched between us. Then I said, "Why are you really here?" She looked down at her hands. For a moment she seemed younger, less polished, almost unsure. "He's scared," she said quietly. "He thought your money was a given, that no matter what he did, you'd always be there, pay, fix, forgive. And now? He doesn't know who he is without it." I nodded slowly. Good. Let him find out. She didn't argue, just sat there a little longer, then stood. "Ellie's lucky to have you," she said, before leaving. When the door closed behind her, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I stood at the kitchen sink, washing my teacup, and whispered to myself, "You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your savings. You don't owe them your peace." The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was mine. And that was beginning to feel like more than enough. By midweek, I began preparing for something I hadn't dared even think about before: moving. Not because I was being chased out, not because someone needed my house or hinted it was too much for a woman my age, simply because I wanted to. I was ready. I sat down with a pen and paper and asked myself, what would it look like to live only for myself for once? The list surprised me. No yard work, no maintenance calls, no roof to worry about or gutters to clean. A place where I didn't see ghosts in every corner. A space that didn't remind me who I'd been taken for. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, near Ellie's campus, not far from the library. It wasn't glamorous, but it had light, quiet, and a balcony that overlooked a line of maple trees. I signed the lease 2 days later, paid the deposit, didn't ask anyone's opinion. When I told Ellie, she squealed. "You're moving?" she asked. Like, really moving. "Really," I said. "End of the month." "I'll help. I'll do all the heavy lifting." I smiled. "I might just take you up on that." That night, I started packing the books first, the easiest goodbye. Then the dishes I never used, the linens that held no memories, the knickknacks I used to dust and resent. I made 3 boxes for donation, 2 for trash, and only 1 marked important. In that box, Harold's photo, Ellie's first drawing, my mother's brooch, the letter I'd written Ellie last week, unsigned but folded with care. The next morning, I called a moving service. A polite young man named Tyler answered. I asked about rates, boxes, timing. He said they could have a crew out next week. "Just let us know where you're going," he said. And for the first time in a long while, I had an answer that was mine alone. After the call, I sat on the porch, still mine for a few more days, and watched the wind shift through the trees. A neighbor waved. I waved back. But there was no ache, no nostalgia, just peace. Then, around noon, the mail arrived. A letter, handwritten. The envelope thick and clumsy, like someone had rewritten it twice. Trent. I held it for a long moment, then opened it with steady fingers. Mom, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, so I'll just say it. I've been awful to you. I've taken and taken, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that's what sons are allowed to do. I'm not good at saying sorry. I always wait too long, or I make it worse. But I saw your name taken off everything, the accounts, the cosigns, even the emergency contact forms. And it hit me. You weren't trying to punish me. You were protecting yourself. And you should have. I can't undo what I did, especially not the thing with the car. I've never felt smaller than I did when Ellie asked me, "Is this really who you are?" I didn't know how to answer her. I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I can't ask for money. But I want to ask for one thing, a second chance to act like your son. Trent. I read it twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter. It didn't fix anything. But it didn't hurt either. Progress, I suppose, sometimes shows up not in grand gestures, but in small, clumsy sentences on cheap stationery. I didn't call him. Not yet. Let him sit with what he wrote. Let him live in it the way I'd lived in silence for so long. That evening, Ellie stopped by with 2 rolls of packing tape and a smile so wide it made me laugh. "You ready?" she asked. "More than ever," I said. And I meant it. Moving day came without ceremony. No going away party. No neighbors crowding the porch. No long farewells. Just me, a thermos of tea, 3 hired movers, and Ellie, who showed up in leggings and a t-shirt that read, "Do not disturb unless you have snacks." The house was half empty already. I'd spent the last week going room to room, asking each object the same silent question. Do you still belong to me, or are you part of the version of me I've left behind? Most things answered clearly. By 11 a.m., the truck was loaded. The movers worked fast, polite, no fuss. Ellie rode with me in my car, a box of fragile dishes on her lap. I watched the old house disappear in the rearview mirror. White siding, overgrown roses, the shutter Trent once promised to fix. No tears. Not even a lump in the throat. Just a clean break. The new place smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleanser. Quiet hallways, wide elevators, small dogs yapping in the distance. The woman across the hall opened her door as we passed and said, "Welcome." I liked her immediately. Ellie took charge of the kitchen boxes. "You're not allowed to lift anything heavier than your purse," she ordered. "Yes, ma'am." By evening, we had the bed assembled, the curtains up, and the kettle boiling. The rest could wait. We sat on my new balcony, legs up, mugs in hand. The maples swayed, and below, 2 kids played tag between parked bicycles. "You really did it," Ellie said, smiling. "I really did." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "How does it feel?" I thought about that. Like I moved out of someone else's expectations and into my own space. She didn't say anything, just smiled against my arm. I reached into the side table where I'd tucked Trent's letter. I hadn't told her I'd gotten it. I handed it to her. She read it slowly, lips pressed tight. When she finished, she looked up. "He means it." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't mean I owe him trust on demand." "No," she agreed. "It just means he finally sat still long enough to listen to himself." She folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "You'll know when you're ready to respond." I nodded. Later that night, after she left, I made myself a sandwich and sat by the window. No television. No phone. Just the sound of my own breath, steady and present. I realized, somewhere in the quiet, that I wasn't lonely. I was simply alone. And that was something different entirely. The first full morning in the new apartment, I didn't wake to anyone else's needs. No early phone call about a forgotten bill. No text from Trent asking if I could spot him until next Friday. No knocks at the door with expectations hidden behind polite smiles. Just light. Real golden light filtering through soft curtains onto my new floors. I made coffee. The real kind. None of that instant powder I used to settle for because why waste the good stuff when it's just me? I used the ceramic mug Ellie bought me 2 Christmases ago, the one that says, unapologetically herself. After breakfast, I sat on the balcony with the crossword, just because I wanted to, not because I was passing time between responsibilities. The clues were tricky, but I liked the challenge. By late morning, I'd received 2 emails, one from the moving company confirming everything was squared away, and one from my lawyer, Mr. Lafferty. The trust had been finalized. Ellie was now the sole beneficiary. Her name secure, the funds protected, everything legal. I read the scanned paperwork 3 times before leaning back in my chair. It was done, not in theory. Not in planning, in reality. I forwarded the email to Ellie with a short note. This is for your future, but more than that, it's for your freedom. Use it wisely and never apologize for being strong. She replied within 5 minutes. I'm crying. I don't even know what to say. Thank you, Grandma. I love you so much. I pressed my palm against the desk, grounding myself in the moment. This was what it felt like to give, not from guilt, not from obligation, but from purpose. In the afternoon, I took a walk to the market down the street, picked out plums, sourdough bread, a wedge of cheese I didn't need but wanted. Nobody rushed me. Nobody followed me with a cart asking if I'd buy snacks for them, just this once. I paid with my own card, the one that only has my name on it now. As I walked home, I passed a small bookstore with a sign in the window. Free poetry reading, Thursday evening. I stood there longer than I needed to. Back home, I made a note in my calendar. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Do something new. That night, after a dinner I made solely for myself. Roasted vegetables, simple and lovely. I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced. Not a real dance, just a sway in the living room, barefoot, to an old song Harold used to hum in the garage. The melody took me somewhere soft, somewhere before regret and bitterness. And as I moved, slowly, gently, I whispered to myself the quiet truth I'd long buried. You're allowed. You've always been allowed. Thursday evening, I went to the poetry reading. I wore my good blouse, the one with the soft lilac pattern, and the earrings Ellie gave me on her last birthday. Tiny gold hoops, nothing flashy. Just enough to remind myself I still had style in me if I chose to use it. The bookstore was tucked into the corner of a block I'd passed 3 times that week without noticing. A narrow place with mismatched chairs, old rugs, and the scent of paper and cinnamon. A young woman at the front asked if I wanted tea. I nodded. She handed me a cup without asking what kind. I liked that. The room was half full. Older folks like me, college students, a couple holding hands in the corner. No one looked hurried. No one asked who I was. The first poet was nervous. A man in his 60s who read about his mother's kitchen. The smell of lemon oil, the sharp click of a clock over the stove. I closed my eyes and could hear it. Could feel the rhythm of that memory like a heartbeat. Another poet, barely 20, read about learning to say no without a reason. I almost laughed, not at her, but at how long it had taken me to learn that same word. Decades she hadn't lived yet. When the reading ended, people lingered. I lingered too. A woman my age turned to me and said, "That second poem hit me like a shovel to the ribs." I smiled. "A good kind of hit, though." She nodded. "I'm Dolores. Virginia." We sat in the corner and talked. She was divorced, retired, living in a condo near the lake. "I'm finally learning what quiet sounds like when no one's stealing it," she said. I told her I'd just moved, just taken some things back that should have never been borrowed. She raised her teacup. "To late bloomers." We clinked gently, like it was champagne. Back home, I found a message from Trent. Not angry, not pitiful, just a line of text. "I hope you're okay. I'm here if you ever want to talk. No pressure." No pressure? That part caught me, because for once it sounded real, like maybe he'd stopped trying to push his way in. I didn't answer. Not yet, but I didn't delete it either. The next day, Ellie came by. She brought soup from a new place she loved and a canvas bag of books she thought I might like. "I saw your name in the bookstore guest list," she said, grinning. "You really went?" "I really did." She looked proud. The kind of pride that doesn't come from achievement, but from recognition. We ate in the living room, the windows open, letting in a breeze that smelled faintly of pine. At one point, she said, "Dad asked me what you're planning to do with the house." "I'm selling it," I said simply. She nodded. "He won't like that." "I'm not doing it for him to like. He might think it's the end." "It's not," I said. "It's just the part where the story changes direction." She reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. And this time, I let myself feel it. Not just the warmth of her palm in mine, not just the kindness, the pride. Real, earned, mine. Sunday morning came quiet and unannounced. I'd forgotten to set the alarm, but it didn't matter. My body woke with the light. No chores waiting. No one else's schedule to keep. Just the soft rustle of wind through the trees outside my window and the hum of possibility that had settled in me over these past weeks, like a new kind of rhythm. I made oatmeal the slow way. Milk, not water. Cinnamon stirred in gently. A slice of peach on top. I ate it on the balcony with the morning sun on my face and no one rushing me to finish, no one calling with some urgent need only I could fix. When I went inside, I passed by the envelope still sitting on the kitchen counter. Trent's letter. I hadn't moved it since the day I read it. Not out of hesitation. Out of intention. I picked it up now, folded it again, and put it in the drawer with Ellie's card. Not because I planned to forget it, but because I was ready to remember it without reliving it. At noon, Ellie came over. She wore her usual Sunday uniform, jeans, clean sneakers, hair still damp from her morning shower. "Ready?" she asked. We drove back to the old house. The realtor was meeting us at 2, but I wanted one more walkthrough before strangers started measuring its worth in square footage and resale value. It didn't feel like mine anymore. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel a pull, a pang. Instead, I felt something softer, like the closing of a well-read book. We walked room to room. Ellie held my hand in the kitchen. "This is where you taught me how to crack eggs," she said. "You always got shells in the bowl? You always picked them out without saying a word. In the hallway? This is where you taped my height every year. I think you skipped a line once to feel taller." "Only once," she laughed. "In the living room. This is where Grandpa used to fall asleep in the chair with the remote still in his hand. He'd swear he was watching something important. We stood in silence for a while after that. Then Ellie turned to me and said, "You know, this place taught me how to feel safe." "That's what it was for," I said. "But safety isn't the same as freedom." "No," she agreed, squeezing my hand. "It isn't." We locked up the house for the last time, just as the realtor arrived. She was young, efficient, polite. She asked if I wanted her to handle everything by email. "Yes," I said. "No need for showings or small talk. Just let it go." She nodded. "You're one of the easiest clients I've had." I smiled. "I've done my hard work already." Back at the apartment, Ellie helped me hang the last photo. A simple black and white of Harold standing beside our first truck, sleeves rolled up, proud as anything. She looked at it and asked, "Do you think he'd be proud of you now?" "I think he always was," I said. "But I think now, I finally am too." We had tea on the balcony again as the sun began to dip. She pulled a folded paper from her bag. "I wrote something," she said, suddenly shy. "For one of my classes. Can I read it to you?" "Of course." She cleared her throat. "My grandmother taught me that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's what we're handed instead of love. Sometimes it's what we choose instead of rage. And sometimes it's the space we leave behind when we decide to speak anyway." She never shouted, but she never needed to. Her life was loud enough with grace, with endurance, with all the things she gave without asking for anything back. But now she asks. Not because she needs permission, because she finally knows she never needed it. By the time she finished, my hands were trembling. She looked at me, eyes shining. "I want to live like that," she said softly, "with that kind of quiet strength." I reached for her hand. "You already do." I never imagined the last part of my life would feel like the first. Not a repeat, not nostalgia, something else. A beginning made from endings I finally allowed. It's been 3 months since I moved. The apartment no longer feels new. The walls have absorbed my rhythms. The kettle knows when to whistle. The grocery clerks know my name. The librarian sets aside books she thinks I'll like, and she's usually right. The house sold quickly. Clean papers, a fair offer, no drama. I didn't go back for one last look. I didn't need to. Everything I wanted from that life is already here, folded into me. Trent still sends the occasional message. Nothing entitled anymore. Just small, careful steps. He even called once, just to say Ellie had passed a big exam and he was proud of her. I listened, said thank you. Told him I was proud too. That was it. No rehashing, no pulling open old wounds. We're not rebuilding what we had. We're simply not pretending it never broke. And that's enough. Ellie visits often. Sometimes we talk for hours. Sometimes we just sit. She's learning who she is, and I get to witness it with clear eyes now. Not filtered through worry or obligation or someone else's drama. Just her. Just me. I wrote her another letter. I haven't given it to her yet. It's tucked away in my drawer, beneath Harold's photo. A quieter letter. No speeches. Just a note. If one day you feel that everything you are is being slowly taken, stop. Even if it's quiet. Even if no one else notices. Especially then. I don't know what she'll do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe she'll find it one day when I'm gone. Maybe it'll remind her of the time we sat on this very balcony and shared tea and poems and truth. Maybe that's all a legacy really is. I still dance sometimes. In the kitchen, in the hallway, to old songs, new songs, sometimes no music at all. My body isn't what it was, but it's mine. And it moves without asking anyone's permission. The other day, I bought myself a pair of earrings. Silver, not gold. Not expensive. But I saw them in a window and thought, why not? That's what it keeps coming back to. Why not? Why not speak? Why not leave? Why not protect yourself? Why not begin again, even at 72? Why not live a life that belongs entirely to you? So here I am, on a quiet Sunday, sitting in the place I chose, drinking the tea I like, wearing earrings that jingle softly every time I laugh. And I do laugh now, not because things are perfect, but because I am no longer waiting for them to be. If you're reading this, if you've ever been made to feel like your giving is expected, your silence required, your needs inconvenient, let me tell you something plainly. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to protect what's left of you and rebuild what was lost. And if someone tells you that makes you cruel or selfish or dramatic, let them. Let them speak whatever truth they need to soothe themselves. Then go live yours. Because your life doesn't belong to the people who forgot how to value it. It belongs to you, and that is the most dangerous, beautiful thing they'll ever witness. If this story spoke to something inside you, I'll ask only this. Tell someone. Share it. Not for me. For you and the next woman who's still quietly erasing herself, one favor at a time. And if you're her, stop. Right now. Before the ink runs out. You were never just borrowing space in this world. You were always allowed to own it.